In a dusty corner of an industrial town in West Africa, there stood an iron gate, tall, rusted, and worn by years of sun, rain, and careless hands. Behind that gate was a great factory, and beside the gate, in a tiny wooden cubicle with a broken fan and a crooked chair, sat a man named Kola. But no one called him Kola. To the managers, he was Gate Man. To the cleaners, he was Baba by the door. To the world, he was nobody. Yet, every morning before the cocks crowed, the man would rise, sweep the dusty entrance, light his tiny stove, and boil water for tea made from leaves he gathered himself. Then he would open the gate, wide and quietly, as though welcoming spirits into a sacred place. He had done this for 15 years. No one remembered when he started. He was simply always there. The factory behind the gate was once a crown jewel, a bustling place that produced fine machines and fed hundreds of families. It bore the name of a proud dynasty, run by the son of its founder, a man who loved titles more than wisdom. Inside the factory walls, the paint peeled, machines broke often, and workers whispered of missing salaries and secret night deliveries. But no one asked questions. Those who did were sent away. And so, life moved like a tired river. But the gatekeeper watched. He watched the trucks that arrived with fewer goods than they claimed. He watched the managers who drove new cars but could not fix leaking roofs. He watched the books of numbers tossed carelessly into trash bins outside the office. He watched, and he remembered. No one knew that the man who opened the gate also opened books each night. By candlelight, he studied old ledgers tossed away by careless accountants. He read magazines wrapped around food. He listened to business news on a rusty radio with an antenna made of wire and hope. He wrote things down neatly in the same brown notebook he had carried for years. While others slept, he was learning. What no one saw was this. The gatekeeper had once been a teacher, then a businessman, then a husband. But fate had thrown him into a storm, a betrayal, a death, and a silence that stretched for years. The gate was not his prison. It was his shelter and his plan. Each year, he used his meager salary to buy one share in the very company whose gate he opened. Not in his name, but through names no one would trace. Quietly, steadily, like rain filling a jar. By the 15th year, the man by the gate owned more of the company than those who wore suits inside. But still, he said nothing. Then came the week, everything changed. Strange things began to happen. The factory's founder fell ill and died. The new leader stumbled in greed. Workers began to murmur loudly. A junior staff member disappeared after reporting missing inventory. And then, one hot afternoon, a black Jeep rolled to a stop before the old iron gate. From its doors stepped men in clean suits with briefcases. They did not ask for the manager. They did not head toward the office. Instead, they asked for the gatekeeper. Eyes widened. Laughter rose and fell. But the man stood. He dusted off his shirt, closed his notebook, and walked calmly toward the car. That evening, as the sun died behind the warehouse roof, stories began to rise like smoke. That the gatekeeper had met with the board. That documents had been handed over. That old secrets were no longer safe. For the first time, the workers looked at the man by the gate and truly saw him. They say when a storm is about to come, the birds grow silent. And after the black Jeep came to the factory gate, silence fell. The gatekeeper returned to his post as if nothing had changed. He still swept the ground, still boiled tea, still greeted those who ignored him. But within the walls of the factory, fear had begun to breathe. Whispers moved faster than machines. Some said the gatekeeper had brought auditors. Others claimed he was related to the company's original founder. A few said he was part of the secret shareholders' circle, sent to judge the company's sins. But the truth was simpler and more dangerous. For years, the gatekeeper had collected not just shares, but proof. Proof of stolen goods, proof of fake contracts, proof of salaries paid to ghost workers, proof of nights when trucks carried company assets to secret warehouses. He had everything. And when the founder died and the sun rose with pride, but no vision, the gatekeeper offered the truth to the only people who could not ignore it, the board of directors. You see, the company was not just a family business. It had investors. It had silent watchers. And those watchers cared little for family pride or titles. They cared only for profit. When they read the gatekeeper's reports, filled with dates, signatures, and copies of what had been thrown away, they did not laugh. They listened. They investigated. They summoned lawyers. And then, like a mighty tree rotting from the inside, the company began to collapse. The general manager, once untouchable in his foreign suits, was asked to step aside. The founder's son, arrogant and loud, was stripped of his title. Department heads were replaced. Accounts were frozen. People stared as familiar names were escorted out with their heads down. But the man at the gate remained still. He did not celebrate. He did not raise his voice. He did not seek applause. Instead, he watched again as the doors of power finally opened to him. For the first time, he was invited to speak at the board table. No wooden stool, no gate behind him, just men and women in suits, waiting to hear what the gatekeeper would say. And when he spoke, his words were not bitter. He spoke of structure, of forgotten values, of workers who had once cared about their jobs until they were beaten down by greed. He spoke of restoring balance, not to punish, but to rebuild, because wisdom does not come wrapped in loud voices. And humility is the language of those who have walked through fire and still remembered to carry water for others. The board listened, then they voted, and on that day, the man once called Gateman was made interim director of operations. He did not take the biggest office. He did not buy a new car. He did not fire those who once mocked him. Instead, he asked that the staff quarters be fixed, that salaries be paid on time, that younger workers be mentored, that the truth, once buried, be placed in the company's foundation going forward. And as the sun set over the compound, workers stood by the gate, watching. The same gate they had passed through every day for years. Now it felt like something sacred, because the man who once opened it for others had finally walked through it himself. Time passed. The factory that once groaned under the weight of corruption began to breathe again. Machines hummed, workers smiled, and in the courtyard, people now greeted the gate, not as a passage, but as a symbol. They no longer called him Gateman. Now, they called him Sir Collowell. But the man who had once watched from shadows did not change. He still arrived early, though now with a driver. He still drank his tea from the same tin cup, and he still visited the gate, often standing beside it, as if remembering something only he could see. Many wondered why he stayed. He had power now, a seat at the highest table. He had wealth, shares had grown, and offers flooded in. He had respect. Even his enemies lowered their eyes in his presence. But Kola stayed for a reason only the old spirits understood. You see, he believed leadership was not the destination, but a season. And seasons, like harmattan and rain, must come and go with grace. So instead of clinging to power, he began to prepare the ground. He took young workers aside and taught them not just how to work, but how to think. He visited the families of cleaners and guards. He funded evening classes for staff who had never finished school. He built a small reading hall near the back of the compound, where anyone could come, read, and dream. But most of all, he mentored a young woman named Amara. She had started as a receptionist, quiet, brilliant, always observing. She reminded him of himself, except with more fire and less fear. And over the years, as others chased titles, Amara followed knowledge. Kola saw it. And one day, quietly, he handed her a worn brown notebook, the one he had carried for 15 years. Inside were observations, numbers, lessons, and above all, vision. That was the moment he knew the gate was no longer his to guard. On the day he announced his departure, there was no party, no grand ceremony, just a letter on the board and a new name placed beside Managing Director. Amara. People were shocked. He had many options. More seasoned leaders, foreign-trained experts, people with big names. But Kola had chosen heart over history. He had chosen someone who still listened more than she spoke. Someone who had once asked about the gate, not just the office. And then, quietly, Kola walked to the iron gate, the same one he had opened for others so many years ago. He looked at it, ran his hand over its surface, and, this time, he left it open. Then he walked away, not in defeat, but in fulfillment. He had come with nothing. He had left with nothing. But in between, he had changed everything.